pumping people in and out of driving school, putting them on the road when they shouldn't be on the road. Instead of putting real people who care about driving in trucks, we're going to put bad people in trucks and then develop technologies to make them good.
Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Hey everybody, Happy New Year's Eve, Happy New Year's. This is probably the final episode of Voice of Gord for foul year of our Lord 2024. Very happy to bring you a discussion with my good friend Danielle Chaffin. She's a young lady with a family history in the trucking business who hails from Tennessee, and she joins the show to discuss with us her role in developing and supporting a transportation management system piece of software. And her, again, I mentioned her family history in trucking and her sort of views on trucking and dealing with people in it that are pretty simpatico with mine. We got to keep it real and focus on the human element. And in a year like 2024, I think that's a message people need to hear. We had a great conversation, and I'm happy to bring it to you. Things have been a little slow around Voice of Gord Studios. I apologize once again. You hear me saying that a lot. Hard to get shows out. 2 kids, 2 jobs, wife, busy family life, trying to write, and just no time. So my apologies to you, the listeners, and to my guests who may be hearing this, wondering why my interviews with them aren't out the door yet. I've got another 5 or 6 episodes yet to edit and get out, and they will all be coming here in the new year. I've got some stuff cooking on the back burner here I'm going to be sharing with you soon, and hopefully that provides me a bit more time for editing and recording shows, and 2025 will be even better for you. Well, I hope you're having a wonderful New Year's holiday and enjoying time with friends and family. Be careful out there on the roads. Speaking of the roads, I just released a pretty major piece on my Substack regarding road safety and the people our government let onto it driving truck who probably shouldn't be there. It's gone a little bit viral. It's been read 4,500 times. I've been offered now by a couple of major media outlets to publish it, maybe like a slightly different version than my Substack, but go read it. autonomoustruckers.substack.com. The piece in question is called Truckers Tikka Masala. If you're a Canadian and you've heard about the Humboldt tragedy, it touches on why that is and why there just seems to be truck collisions and accidents and trucks in the ditch all over the place, especially in the more beautiful parts of the country like northwestern Ontario and the mountains of British Columbia. And I draw some parallels to what's going on there with this recent discussion about the use and abuse of H-1B visas and the importation or insourcing of foreign labor to America because our employers are a bunch of cheap cocksuckers and they don't want to pay us properly. So, yeah, head on over to autonomoustruckers.substack.com, have a read of that, have a listen to my good and beautiful friend Danielle, and have yourself a wonderful 2025. I can't wait to bring you guys more awesome podcasts and great writing stuff. Have a good one out there. Let's get to the show. All right, g'day everybody. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Voice of Gord podcast project. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. The other voice you're about to hear today is a fine young lady. I've been trying to get on the show for a little while here. Her long family history in the trucking business, and she's going to tell us all about that. And in her career, working for a TMS software development company. TMS, I believe, stands for Transport Management Systems, which is sort of the back end that trucking companies use to keep track of all of us nincompoops going up and down the road. So, anyway, the other voice is Danielle Chaffin. Welcome to the show, Danielle.
Thank you, Gord. Thank you.
Uh,
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
yeah, and I'm finding you in your home base somewhere in the wilds outside of Nashville, Tennessee.
That is correct. It's a neighborhood. We don't live on a farm as of now. So, yeah,
Right, but you did at one point.
I did for many years. My family owns a 40-acre farm, and I lived in my great grandmother's house that was there since the first part of it was built in, not that any of this is relevant, but it's kind of interesting. The first part of the house, she had seven children. It was built in 1940s or earlier. One bedroom, one living room, and then they added on to it throughout the years. But it was pretty cool to live there.
Right. Are you familiar? There's an old country song called "Give Me 40 Acres and I'll Turn This Rig Around."
I know what you're talking about. I could not tell you the song or more lyrics to it than that,
No,
but
it's just hilarious that your family's farm was exactly 40 acres.
um, I think it's actually like 41.7 to
Oh,
be
come on.
exact.
Come on now, that's not very much fun.
I see 40 was way better.
Let's see. Yeah, yeah. Let's eliminate the spreadsheet brain out of ourselves and go with the flow.
I'll try. I can't make any promises.
All right. Family's got a farm, and as I understand it, so we met online, as
You
I've
did.
done with so many of my guests, but then we got to meet in person at the Mid America Trucking Show, not this year, but the year before in 2023.
Hmm.
Yeah, you drove out all by your lonesome and you came and hung out with a bunch of roughneck truckers you met from Twitter.
I did. I did. And it was by far, I go to several conferences throughout the year, more so on the like freight broker and technology side. Matt's, no offense to any of the others, Matt's is my favorite now.
Right.
According to my parents, I went as a child once. I don't really remember that. But to
Right.
be able to go to it again and meet all of the friends in real life, it was really, really fun.
To your mind, what is it that makes Matt's so much better than all of these other sort of freight tech conferences you have to go to as part of your job?
One, oh, well, the first movie, I didn't have a work obligation. So I wasn't there to work. I just got to go and walk around, which I don't get to do usually at a conference. I'm usually at the booth, have scheduled meetings, pretty rigid schedule. Matt's, like I said, I didn't have a work obligation. I just went and got to walk around. It actually took me 3 hours to get through every building when I made it a point that I wanted to go by every, I think there's three buildings at Matt's. It's huge. Point number two is that it's huge.
Yeah, that Kentucky Exposition Center thing in South Louisville there, it's a pretty sprawling complex, and Matt's only takes up the sort of main wings, which I
Yeah,
think there's actually like four or five. I don't think it's just three, maybe four.
maybe.
And then it spills into outside because there's all the truck displays. Last year they were kind of around back. This year they had all the trucks out front by the main entrance.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you actually wanted to go to Matt's and see every single vendor display presentation, like you just couldn't. There's just too much. Like I don't think it's
No.
possible in the 3 days of the show to see all of it.
No, I don't think so. I finally made it outside to the trucks and it started raining, which was fine for a few minutes. It was just sprinkling, but then it started raining a lot more. I don't even think I saw all the trucks.
Yeah, the show and shine out front's pretty spectacular. This year I think it might have only rained once briefly, not very much. It was actually pretty nice out for the most
It
part.
was.
but
It was.
it was unseasonably cool this year, so it was a little chilly. Standing around drinking beer with guys that own awesome old iron that's been kept in really good show level quality. Yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, there's one truck there. My dad was supposed to go with me, which I was very excited about to get to share that with my dad, and he didn't end up going. I was disappointed, but it's okay. We have more years. But there's one truck there. It's a brown truck. I forget the name of it or who owns it now. But the original owner, my dad used to run with when they were hauling cattle. So just knowing like the history or the backstory of the truck, the same guy doesn't own it now. It's a different guy, but that was really cool. And I went to talk to him.
The trucking industry, despite there being 3 million odd truckers in the U.S. and America just being this humongous country, and the trucking industry being as diverse as it is, it still feels tight knit sometimes. Eh?
It is very tight knit. Yeah. Yeah, I always tell people that my reputation, I didn't care about it previously just because that's the type of person I am. But your reputation really matters here.
It does, and I would argue a little bit that depending on the company, it might not sometimes. Eh? I think so. We have this problem. They say there's like this driver shortage. It's just a sort of churn and retention problem. But
Hmm.
like from my experience, a lot of companies are looking for like a sweet spot. They want a driver that's got like at least 2 years of experience, but like not too many to the point where they're actually independent and they know what they're doing, because then they can't be pushed around. Or like if you're me, like I've just self-selected out of the trucking business because like I've told this story before. I went to go work for these guys in Syracuse. I hadn't been trucking for a while. I shouldn't say I hadn't been trucking. I'd been outside of the North American trucking business for a few years because I was down in Australia driving trucks.
Uh,
So I come back to North America, move to the US, get my green card. Everything's like sorted. And so I go apply it with this company in Syracuse. And like the HR guy was really hung up on the fact that like I had no verifiable experience for like 2.5 years while I was away and moving and doing stuff. And I said to him, well, I was actually driving truck in Australia, right? Like, do you know what road trains are? And this guy had no clue. We had this like weird interaction on the phone, and he hung the phone up on me because he thought I was giving him attitude, which may or may not have been true. Anyway, I call him back and I said, look, dude, like, I'm sorry that there was this like miscommunication. I really wasn't trying to give you a hard time, but I am genuinely confused given my experience. The fact I was outside of the United States and Canada for a while is such a big deal. And they kind of went off on this spiel about insurance and whatever. And I said, don't do you not have like my resume I sent you and all these photos of trucks I've driven and whatever? And he says, well, I think I might have lost them. Can you resend them to me? And then I'll send them to the big boss, like the president of the company. You know, these guys only had at the time, like, I don't know, 60 trucks kind of spread out all over upstate New York. So I send them the stuff. And then I get a phone call 5 minutes later, like directly from the president of the company. When can you be here? We want to talk to you. So like the HR guy who's more concerned with like insurance and ticking boxes and bullshit got hung
hmm.
up on the fact that like I did not live in North America for a little while, but his boss who had actually driven a truck and worked in the company since he was a kid just took one look at everything I've done and said like we must have this guy, right? There's this weird disconnect in the trucking business here where like yes, your reputation is important, but I think that like the sort of imposition of like human resourceism and spreadsheet brain thinking is getting in the way of that for certain companies.
Yes. And I would say that that is your example is a microcosm of what we deal with the checking boxes,
Spreadsheet
spreadsheet.
brain. I mean, they're spreading shit too. So you do. So before we get into your family history,
Yeah.
your connection to trucking in a professional capacity is through these software packages that in the industry are known as TMS.
Yeah.
can you explain to me what TMS is?
I can. Essentially, at the very core, the transportation management system is the software or the service on the computer that the back office team, your dispatchers, your freight brokers are using to load in those customer orders, those origin destination points, what you're going to be hauling, and the pricing for that.
It does all
And
this stuff.
most of them will do all of the stuff. Some of them are very specific to one piece or the other. But most of your big name TMSs like Revenova, McLeod, um, TMW, they're going to have almost everything baked into the product.
Right. I believe TMW was the system. There's this one trucking company I worked for in Canada for a long time. My dad works for them again now. I think when I worked for them a long time ago, they had a TMW system. So this transport management system, in addition to doing the dispatch and load orders and stuff, I'm assuming it interfaces with like your Qualcomm, your communication system with the trucks,
It
your
does.
your
And I think
ELDs.
that's, well, the ELD mandate, of course, pushed that a lot further than it was. But as of now, let me back up. Yes. The ELD information is pushed into the TMS. So, like the location updates, your arrival departure times, we can calculate ETAs based on, of course, your current location versus where you're supposed to be going. But the data that we're getting in the TMS from the ELDs is crazy to me. Not in a negative way, but just like the engine state, the fuel percentage, temperature of the engine. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I believe so. I read this book once and I interviewed this lady who wrote it. Her name's Karen Levy. Uh, Wrote a book called Data Driven Truckers Technology in the New Workplace Surveillance. And the
I'm gonna
term,
write that down.
yeah, oh, I had her. I'll send you the link to the show. I interviewed her and I'll send you a very lengthy review I wrote of her book for this sort of like
I will read it.
policy wonk magazine. Um, the term Karen used about the different information that these systems grab was interoperability. So, like, your Qualcomm is not merely an ELD, it's finding out all kinds of other information about what the truck's doing, the history of its operation, and can tell you all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's a word gets thrown around a lot called telematics.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's sort of in there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's like I say, it's not just like, location. Because I remember these same guys I worked for in Canada were one of the first trucking companies in Canada to put Qualcomms in their trucks back in the very late 1980s, early 90s. There was sort of a group of these trucking companies that got a deal from Qualcomm, and the paddocks had them in their trucks. But like, it allowed the sort of it interfaced with the TMS system, which would have been a pretty early one at the time, right? Because this is the early 1990s. And it didn't tell it very much. It was just like load order numbers, very sort of small text messages that dispatch could send to the drivers or back and forth. It
Mm-hmm.
could tell you where the truck was. And I think in the earliest iterations of them, like if it was on or off and not much else. But like as Qualcomm's got better and engines, so because back then, like a lot of truck engines were still sort of mechanical. There wasn't like an ECM or anything electronic to
You
plug
could like
into.
work on it with normal tools.
Yeah. So it would have been hard to plug a piece of technology like this into the motor because there was nothing to plug into, right? But so
Right.
as the engines got more and more electronic management, they were able to like jack in Qualcomm to it and find out more and more stuff. And now you can basically find out everything about what that motor's doing via wire back to the office.
I think Qualcomm was probably one of the first. I don't know that it's factual, but I think they were one of the first telematics products that we have. It's crazy to me though, because when I was a kid and my grandpa was driving, calling in on like a landline phone, 2 hour landline phone, my dad was the same way. And now, I don't know, technology is wild.
Yeah, I'm not that old. I mean, I am. I'm 45, but I remember riding around with my dad, and it was, the 1-800 number for the company from a payphone at the truck stop or a customer. And that was still standard operating procedure. When I started driving in 1997, like they had pagers and cell phones were around, but it was still too kind of expensive for people to have them.
Yep.
And so we just continued using the sort of 1-800 number. And then probably by about mid 2000s, um, everybody had cell phones and no more using the bank of telephone boxes at the truck stop, you know?
Right, right. It's crazy to me thinking about the like tracking updates and visibility, quote unquote, is huge right now, knowing where the truck is at all times. I can't imagine like putting going back in time and putting some people that are in the workforce now or in trucking when the truck driver called when he left and had the load picked up and he didn't call again until it was delivered.
That's
Or like
how,
days later. Like, oh, I delivered that 3 days ago.
right. So when I was hauling sort of like flatbed freight and oversized and
Hmm.
whatever, I haven't done tons of freight. I've done a lot of like niche specialized stuff because that's where the money is. But
Yep.
when I did do freight, I grew up old school. The guys I worked for were like that. Like they would implement sort of new technologies, but they didn't really force it too much. And I would barely ever hear from them. Once in a while, the Qualcomm would beep, "Hey, can you call us?" for like some reason, but like they didn't bug us. I never got I
Yeah.
think I can count on one hand how many times I ever talked to a freight broker when I was trucking back then. Like
Wow.
they
That's
just
probably a
never,
blessing.
I barely ever talked to them. And the guys I did talk to, like I would talk to them once, like, "Hey man, I got the load," or "I'm on my way to get it," because they wanted to know and I would like interact with them. They had some kind of special info they wanted to relay to me directly.
Yeah.
Like I say, 5 times max ever. And they just never bothered me. Like they interacted with our dispatch. So anyway, you've mentioned your dad, you've mentioned your grandpa. Let's start with your grandpa. Where did he grow up? Where's he from? What kind of trucking did he do? Tell us some more.
Of course. He was originally born in Michigan, I think. I'm pretty sure that's true. Originally born in Michigan, moved to Tennessee at some point in his life. His parents were very much involved in my growing up. They lived very close to us, and then we moved when I was all of this is going to play into the story, so give me a minute. But we lived like a couple of miles away from them for a long time, and then we moved to a house on the other end of the street where they lived. So it was my grandpa's mom and dad, which would be my great grandparents, and then the house beside him was my grandpa and his wife, my granny. And so we were with them all the time. Grew up in Tennessee. One of his neighbors was a truck driver. And so he always saw him out, I'll say working on his truck, tinkering on his truck, whatever. He always saw him out. And my grandpa has always loved driving cars, trucks, it didn't matter. He just loved driving. And so he kept seeing the neighbor in his truck and just thought, I want to be a truck driver. This looks like something I would enjoy. And I'm pretty sure that's the only job that he's ever had, besides working around on the farm with his dad, of course. Um, he started out in, I don't know what his first truck was, but along the way is the Diamond Rio that I have on my all my social media pages, the red one. So that was his truck at one point, the cab over, and then it ended up being my dad's first truck, which is really cool to me. And we still have it. Um, Drove that. I don't really know what he did in the very beginning, but then he actually had the cab over and leased to Averitt, which is a huge trucking company now. He leased to them for a long time. He drove for Star. They're out of Tennessee too. He's drove for a bunch of different companies or leased to them. But then his final company, he was working or leasing with Mercer doing flatbed. He never hauled refrigerated freight. He did a little bit of dry van, but it wasn't his favorite. I think he really, really enjoyed the flatbed
Yeah,
business.
slinging chains and tarping loads, and there's a lot of physicality to it.
Yeah. Um, I'll get into booking him on a load in a second, but that's all I ever knew him doing. And he would be gone on the road. He was always like long haul over the road until he got a little bit older and then just started doing more, I'll say regional, not local for sure, regional out of Tennessee, like Ohio, Georgia, the Carolinas. And then he finally retired at 77.
Ripe old age.
I think he would still drive if we would have left him alone.
Did you bug him to come off the road?
Yeah, a little bit. And his wife kind of wanted him home to enjoy retirement.
Yeah, I have a friend here in town. This guy, I've helped him with some construction projects. He's been a contractor and now he's a partner at like a building and design firm in Ithaca. But his dad had two jobs. He worked at the IBM plant in Owego, New York, about 25
Hmm.
miles south of me. And he would work second shift, so 3 to 11. But during the day, he would do like odd renovation jobs and construction and build people decks, fix their cabinets, build kitchen cabinets. And that's where my friend Chris learned how to do this. And his dad, Richard, like he retired from IBM, but then he just kept doing the construction stuff.
Yep.
And like he just celebrated his 80th birthday and he's still working. Like he just did an addition for some guy up in Syracuse. He like lit we go to Syracuse is like an hour and a half drive. Gets up, goes up there, works all day, drives around, comes home. He's 80. He don't need the money. He's got like a lake place up by Watertown, sort of on Lake Ontario. They've got another property in Canada. Like everything's paid for. Bunch of grandkids.
But they can't sit.
You
That
just
is a
can't. You can't
different
sit.
generation. Yeah.
Yeah, can't sit still.
My grandpa's either 79 or 80. But no, he's the same way. He doesn't sit down. He has always had projects going. So when he would come home from like a long trip, he would rest for a day and then he would start in on one of his projects. Whether it was, he also drove like a dirt racing race car when I was a kid. That was very fun to go to the races and watch him race.
Is that like one of those funny looking cars with like the wing up above it?
Yeah, but no, he was in a different class. I don't know what you would call it. Let me see. All your viewers are not going to be able to see this or the audience, but I can at least show you. But yeah, he did that because he loved driving.
Yeah, there's a lot of truckers that are into like motorsports, like they can't get away from it.
Hmm.
Um, I have a friend in Saskatchewan who's been bugging me forever. Gordo, you need to buy a bike, man. Because like he went and got himself a Harley, and then my old bosses in Canada have a Harley. One of them does, and another friend of mine who's really into trucking, and he's got bikes. You know, it seems to be like there's a lot of people that either it's 18 wheels or two.
Yeah. My grandpa also has Harleys, and that's part of his side projects. He'll find Harleys that are not running and buy them and then fix them up and sell it. But he rode Harleys when he would come home. I'm still looking for this picture of a car, but he would ride Harleys when he came home, work on his projects. They built a huge garage a few years ago, him, my dad, and a couple of their buddies. And my grandpa's, I'm not going to say he's way too old to be putting up like trusses at this point, but he was, uh, I don't know, looked kind of scary to me.
You know what? Even if they're not necessarily getting into the like, putting their back into it and lifting it up, a gentleman with that level of experience is somebody you want on site to like direct traffic and show guys what to do and like provide wisdom.
Yes.
I don't.
Yes.
So these guys. Okay, hold on one second. I'm gonna get a beer. I'm gonna edit this out. Don't turn it. Don't touch anything.
Okay, I'm not moving. I won't look for this car. That was quick.
Fridge is right there. So just
Oh,
had to. Yeah. So these guys I work for in Canada, I mention them a lot. The Paddocks. Scott and Mac, and my dad works there. I know half the people there. I grew up in their yard when I was a teenager. So they Scott understands this inclination towards older guys just wanting to work, and the fact that you can't just sort of put people out to pasture like that. Like if they want to work, you let them work. So
Hmm.
there was this one old fella that used to drive for paddocks, and he was again like his name was Ken. I can't remember what his last name was, but he worked until he was in his 80s. And so what he would do is he would take off the winter. So he would like wrap up around Halloween, October sometime. He would go south or whatever, go home, stay there, and then come back to work in April. But from April till October, like good luck keeping up with him. Like 3,000 miles a week, tarp chain, up and down off flatbeds, no problem. You
That's
know?
insane. I
I,
found the picture.
oh, awesome.
Whoa.
you'll
I
have to
disappeared.
you'll have to send that to me later. Usually when I put my show out on Substack, I always include photos from my guests.
I
So,
will.
all right. Yeah, and then all of your grandpa and your dad's trucks too. Let's
I
nerd
will
out.
send it to you.
But yeah, the people just because we hit some arbitrary number like 65 doesn't mean that like, well, okay, that's it. You just hang around and not do anything, right? And
Yeah, one of the questions that I finally stopped asking people, but it would be individuals over the age of 65. But I was very curious, like as you get older, especially into that age, does your mind actually change or is it just like the body ages? And it's always just the body. Like there's nothing in the, of course, gained wisdom and maturity, whatever. But they still feel like a kid at heart. And I love that.
right. There's or is your dad and your grandfather are they readers?
Yes, I think my dad much more than my grandpa. He's more of a listener. Always listen. Well, it used to be on the radio when you would listen to like radio shows,
So
talk shows.
has your grandpa transitioned to listening to podcasts at all? Have you put him onto it?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Well, you'll have to put him onto this one for
I
sure.
will.
All right.
I will absolutely put him on this one.
All right. There's a gentleman who's been on my show. He's a famous writer, this guy named Matthew B. Crawford. I
Hmm.
finally got to meet him in person here a couple of weeks ago. They say don't meet your heroes, but I think Crawford's an exemption to that exception. He's pretty cool. He's a pretty cool guy.
Hmm.
Anyway, he wrote this really awesome book, and I tell all of my trucker friends to read it or get the audio version. It's called Why We Drive Towards a Philosophy of the Open Road. And Crawford talks about like the sort of meaning imbued in the physical act of driving, why people want to drive, what you're actually doing, what's going on in our heads while we're going down the road, what they're trying to take away with us with the imposition of all this technology on cars and trucks nowadays. It is just a fantastic like treatise on driving. It's an amazing book. So your dad can read it and your grandpa can listen.
Well, I'm ordering it now. I already ordered the other one you mentioned.
Oh wow! Oh, you move quick.
Yeah, I'm very efficient.
I would write something like that down and forget about it and come back 2 weeks later. Oh shit! I have to order this.
See, that's why I don't write it. I did write it down, but that's why I do things as quickly as I do because this piece of paper with all these notes on it that are scribbled, at some point I'm going to throw that away.
Right. And so your employers at Revanova probably realize you're super efficient and they like to keep you around. How long have you been with them
Absolutely.
for?
5 years this month.
Okay, so what exactly do you do for them, and what is it about their TMS that like you find good or interesting, or what is it about that company that's led you to stick with them this long?
Absolutely. Um, the first thing, what I do at Revanova, for the first 4 years, we were still a small company. I was employee number 13, and I'm very proud of my hiring
Lucky
number.
13.
I know, I know. So I was number 13 and I came in as a training manager. So flew up to Chicago, spent a couple of days there, met everyone in the company. And the position that I actually went in for was a project manager, but that's not, I have a complex and like a, mm, I don't know what you would call it. I think I can do anything, anything. And if I'm given enough time, I'll figure it out and I will do it and I can be successful at it. But I went in to interview for a project manager, and we realized after talking and my skill set, my experience, that there was a gap in the company for training, teaching our internal teams and also our customers what new features we were rolling out and how to use our product. So, from the base level, every new release that we do, and we do 3 to 4 releases a year, but each one of those new features that they could implement, teaching them how to do it. So anyway, that was my first job for the first 4 years. I wore a lot of hats and I worked a lot of hours, which is fine because that is the type of work ethic that my parents and my grandparents instilled in me. I was raised on a farm. You can't, I just can't not work and I
It's
can't not do a good job.
farming is hard, and there's always something that needs to be done. It's not a regular job by any stretch of the imagination.
Correct. And there's no sitting down. So that is instilled in me and my DNA. So I wore a lot of hats. I did a lot of work. I did all of our, as much time as allowed. I did all of our like social media posts and as much marketing and engagement with our customers as I could. Um, and did a lot of cool stuff. Was successful with many projects for our customers. End of last year, a position came open for a sales engineer or solutions engineer to work with our sales team and all of our prospects. And if there's anything that I love the most about being in this industry, it's talking to other people about their company, their business, their experience, their history, whatever. So it's basically what I get to do now. Also, of course, showing the prospect our product and tailoring the product to their needs, which I have a very solution focused mindset, and that's how I work. So any problem that they give us and I get to build it out for them is really exciting and really fun for me.
So when you say you're building it out, are you actually doing the coding for it, or are you forwarding it on to the coders?
It depends. So in Revanova, we're built on the Salesforce platform. So we get to take advantage of all of the Salesforce tools. Many of their tools, for lack of better words, they've dumbed it down. So it doesn't require a software engineer or someone that can code to set up some basic like triggers or automation. So that's what I do. I have created written code. I would call it more like spaghetti code or copy pasta. Um, it's interesting. I can get it to work and it will work well. No one wants to hire me as a developer. But um yeah, so I like the basic triggers and stuff that I can build them, the custom reports, the cool features that they want set up. I get to do that and show them, and then we get to close deals and help companies grow their business.
Right. I've only ever used Salesforce once. Um, One of my more recent jobs was propane delivery,
Okay.
and like super retail end, like show up at your house, fill your propane tank, show up at a school district and do the big fuel tank for all their
Hmm.
propane powered buses, government buildings, whoever needed propane, and their whole system for their drivers, the pre-trip inspection, hours of service, customer info, routing, accounting, the whole enchilada was all on Salesforce.
That's very interesting. So that's what we do for our clients and customers today. Clients and customers, that's the same thing. But our clients today. Yeah, but it's really cool. Why have I stayed here for 5 years? One is because I have not gotten bored. I, with my work ethic and with my ability to think I can do anything, I also get bored really easily. So if it's a job where I learn how to do it and then I'm doing the same thing every single day over and over, I get very bored and then I just start looking for something else, which hasn't happened too many times. But at Revanova, I learned something new, I would argue, every single day. And I get to
Argue.
solve a lot of problems, and I love solving problems.
Like argue with who?
Anyone. I will argue with anyone also.
Right. Well, it doesn't. I mean, I get maybe you just haven't had any takers on Twitter. I haven't seen you getting like any flame wars or significant battles with anybody.
No, I'm usually pretty careful. I also tend to come off as um I know what I'm talking about, and people don't like to argue with me, even though I like to argue. My friends and family, those are the best ones I get to argue with. So, but then we don't argue a lot because I don't know. But yeah, um,
Would you
the
say so? All right, so you've been with these guys, Revanova, for a bit. You custom tailor solutions, which
yeah,
sounds very corporate speaky.
it
Um,
is. I solve problems creatively.
what would you say? Have you imported any of your relevant trucking experience via osmosis from your dad or your grandpa into Revanova and what you do?
100%. Um, we released a fleet management. So we are a TMS. We built our initial product. So Revenue was 10 years old. Our initial product was for freight brokerages to run their business end to end. Everything that they did was you could do it in Revenova. This year, we released our fleet management product, which is for trucking companies. And I can't teach you the trucking industry without you having a bit of experience. Having the experience, being able to talk to the carriers that we're talking to for prospects and even bringing on new customers, it it's like it completes the puzzle. I'm not trying to figure out what they're doing or why they're doing it. It's just how trucking works, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I use a lot of it. One of my favorite things to do, which doesn't really play into any solution, but when I'm doing demos, I show how drivers can upload their paperwork into the TMS and it'll go straight to the load, which is very cool. But there's a photo on my desktop of my grandpa filling out his paper logs, and I always drop in that one. And some people think it's funny and enjoy it and appreciate it, and then others just sit there, which I know that they don't realize what it is, but
Wow,
sometimes it's a really, really cool icebreaker.
what's that? It's paper, pen? Does anybody even know how to write anymore?
Questionable.
How often do you actually see the written word in your gig? Like obviously we all type on computers, but like actually, you know, penmanship as it were on paper.
How often do I see it?
Yeah. Like
Mm,
in company documents or stuff you have to sign or no?
never. I like my notebook. I write down like my list of meetings and things I do every day. And then a lot of times when I'm on calls, I don't like to type when I'm on calls because I feel like it really takes away from my listening. So I write and then I'll take a picture of those notes and put it in my file for that company. Um, I don't really see anyone else do that. I know at
Right.
the office we have a bunch of whiteboards around, and I always see like drawings and
So
stuff.
where's Revanova headquartered?
Chicago.
Okay. How often do you have to travel there?
I go, well, we have two company events per year. So we have a summer party, get together gathering, and then we have a Christmas dinner. So I go during the summer. Well, I didn't go last year, but I forgot where I was. Maybe I was in Puerto Vallarta or leaving for there. Anyway, but yeah, summer, Christmas.
Right. And so you're working remotely. I imagine that's handy for your family situation.
It is absolutely incredible. I don't waste time on the road. I get my oldest kid on the bus. I take my youngest child to his daycare, which is less than 5 minutes from my house. I'm back home. I'm working. If something needs to be done, like I need to change laundry or start the dishwasher, I jump up. It takes me 5 minutes to do those things. I honestly cannot imagine going back into an office.
Right. And that's interesting because we saw, I mean, this isn't specific to you or anyone else, but we saw a massive, massive expansion of work from home during the Wuhan plague overreaction.
I was wondering what you're about to call it.
And it's interesting because like there are still, I think there was like some kind of protest back home in Canada of like federal government employees who the government basically said to them, like, you guys have to show up in the office a minimum of 3 days a week. And like they were protesting that. They're like their union, CUPE or whatever, or OPSU, I can't remember which government employee union. Like they basically went apeshit and said, no, we're gonna keep on working from home. We don't need to be here.
Wow. I would, when I do go to the office, granted, I'm only there 2 times a year, so of course I'm talking to everyone. My productivity level in the office versus at home, it would drop 50% at least.
Why is that, do you figure?
Well, to say it nicely, when I'm at home, everyone's like chat using a chat or emailing me, and I can ignore those and continue working what I'm working on until I'm ready to answer them.
Right, right. So there's an efficiency in being able to like select when you communicate with your colleagues.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. If someone like walks up to my office door or my desk, I could and probably would, to be honest, but I can't just ignore them. But yeah, and then I get distracted pretty easily. It's a great character trait that I have. And
I
so
ha-
someone,
I have that. I'm sorry to interrupt. That happens to me when I'm like trying to write. So writing's one of these things, I'm not like a creative writer or anything, but
but you're a very great writer.
well, I don't know about that. But anyway, like the muse, like when it hits, like when you really want to like channel
Mm-hmm.
everything, it just
Mm-hmm.
goes and you do the stream of consciousness thing. And I might sit in front of my computer for like 45 minutes or an
Yes.
hour or 2 hours, just hit it and it goes. And then some other times it just like I just can't, it just will not move. And then
Yep.
it's like now I'm on Twitter. Now I'm like going to the fridge for a beer. Now I'm like, man, you know what? I'm gonna go outside and change the spark plug on my weed eater or something. Like I can't
Hmm.
do it. So
Yep.
like the working from home thing, not that I work from home, I only do the writing stuff kind of like part time on the side, like very part time. I've got a couple other jobs. I help my in-laws businesses and stuff. But like I do sit in front of my laptop probably more than a person who does not have an office job.
Mm,
And yeah, the distraction thing is like real easy to fall down rabbit holes.
yeah. Well, I get Judah, my youngest, he's 3. I get him to daycare like 7:30 and I'm back here by 7:40. So from 7:40 until Ezra, my oldest, gets off the bus at like 3:15, I'm most days at 4.5 days out of 5. I'm hyper focused on whatever I'm doing.
So it's like 8.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. You're dialed in.
Yes. Yeah. And I can't get that in the office.
Right. It's almost like trucking because like when you're in a truck, that's it. You're driving. There's no other option. I mean, I guess you could pull over, but then you're not going to make any money. Um, there's some guys. One of the things about trucking, like, is and Steve Viscelli talks about this in his book when he was like trying to teach himself how to make money as a trucker. Like he's this academic guy and he got his CDL and he went trucking for 6 months and he was like teaching himself the discipline and the regimentation of like you do all of your paperwork and all of your non-trucking stuff when you're being held up somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You do all that so that like once the doors are shut on that trailer, you go and you like regiment yourself, your mind, your body into trucking, which makes it like hard for people. Like one of my critiques of the business, as you know, is like it churns through so many people and they have a retention problem and they just keep grabbing people off the street and throw them into CDL school.
Hmm.
It's not for everybody. It's not a normal job. It's not something that you can approach with an incorrect attitude about what the job is and what it requires. And I think people just sort of get sold on the idea, well, you're just driving.
Yeah, it's not. That's not it.
That's not how it goes. You work on this TMS system, you work from home, occasionally you go to conferences,
Mm-hmm.
and you already have this background from your dad and your grandpa. So when you're working with a client who's either a load broker or an asset based carrier, to use the lingo, um,
Uh,
do you ever do you ever have the opportunity, or does it present itself where you can impart some knowledge onto them about actual trucking, or relay something to them like you learned from your dad or your grandpa that will help
yes.
your client in the business, but not within the TMS, within the
Yes.
actual operations?
Yes. And actually I called you about this when I was driving like downtown Nashville a few weeks ago. One of the
Oh
biggest
yeah.
things I hear today, and one of the like more debate discussions that I have, is all of these things about load and route optimization. And everyone wants it because it sounds so cool. And everyone wants to work more efficiently, and everyone wants to get the quickest, shortest route possible without taking into account human knowledge. And I don't like that. I, after I called you, someone had asked me about optimization or something, and there are so many variables in that we would have to take into account to optimize a route from end to end that I would say it's virtually impossible. A road closes because there's a wreck and the driver's 2 miles away from it. Like, how am I going to give that to you? We already have that technology, I believe, in GPS, and also, again, on the human side. I don't need Depends on the truck driver. In my experience, I don't need to give a truck driver turn by turn directions to get from point A to point B because that truck driver is going to do whatever he wants to do to get from point A to point B. And if he knows a route that is going to get him there easier and it's not 20 miles out of the way, he's going to go that route.
That reminds me of a story. It's less about route optimization and more about like the box tickers and spreadsheet brain management type people.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was working in Australia, I would have liked to have stayed there longer. I had a 4 year work visa, but the guy who brought me there at the same time as he was selling his company to somebody else. And my tour working for these guys coincided with this transition.
Yeah.
And it did not work out well for a lot of people, not just me. I ended up
Mm-hmm.
quitting and I had to give up my visa. But one of the things, so one of their customers was this waste management company who dealt with all of the recycling, hazardous goods, scrap metal. There was like a natural gas plant being built in this little tiny town on the west coast of Australia called Onslow. Major offshore natural gas field. They were building an onshore natural gas processing plant. Onslow is nominally like 800 people, and they built a camp and for like 3,000 people to live there working on the construction of this LNG plant. And so we're hauling in and out of there. We're handling all their waste, handling their scrap metal, handling their hazardous materials. We're doing all of this stuff. Every single time I left Perth, I had to sign off on something called the load management plan or some garbage. I had to sign off that I understood the Western Australia hours of service regulations. I had to sign off that I knew the route. There's like two roads that leave Perth going north, the inland route that goes to Newman, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's the coast road that goes up like through Carnarvon and Geraldton and all that and follows the coast. And then you like get to the turn off for Onslow and turn left, and then you drive right into where the plant is. Like it's literally three turns. Like,
Hmm.
but they made me sign off on this sheet every single time, acknowledging that I knew how to get to Onslow. And like my dispatchers and the guys in the office knew how ridiculous this was, but that's like, this is the spreadsheet brain mentality. This is the like too many fucking managers, too
Hmm.
many people that are like justifying their own existence and pushing paper around. How many trips did I go back and forth to Onslow, either from our yard in Perth or from the one up in, Karratha coming from the north? I don't know, hundreds. And every single time I had to sign off on a stack of paperwork like 6 or 7 sheets long. Like I'm hauling scrap bins in and out of a construction site. Like this
Yeah.
is not rocket science. Why do
Yeah.
I have to do this? Like they're just insulting everybody's intelligence, but they say, well, liability and we want to make sure and we're covering this. Like, this is why people, I think that part of this is like why people get out of trucking
Yep.
is because like what something that was once kind of, quasi wild and free is
Yeah.
now the most like surveilled and micromanaged occupation in the world.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not on the road right now. I mean, part of it's because I've got little kids at home, but like I would never work for a company that did that again, you know?
Yeah. I know I don't want to incriminate myself or my father. I don't think he cares. But anyway, not too long ago, my dad had to really argue with his leadership team about turning on the microphone inside of their like in-cab camera that was actually facing outward, but there was a microphone, and my dad was like, absolutely not. No.
Your dad's still on the road.
So he's in a leadership position. However, if a driver is sick, if they don't have enough drivers, he will gladly jump in the seat and drive.
Right. So they have a forward facing camera, which I kind of understand because
Uh-huh.
America is a very litigious society and there's God knows what's going to happen out on the road. You got to cover your bum. I
Yeah.
get it. But like, there's a hot debate about this because there's some people who seem to believe that like it's only a matter of time before the inward facing cameras become legislated. And that's certainly a possibility. However, there's a difference between inward and outward. An
Yes.
outward facing camera is facing a public highway.
Yes.
And when you're in a public place, you have basically already given up your right to privacy, right?
Yep.
Like you're out there interacting with the rest of the world. The government owns the road. There's expectations that like, other people are going to see you driving down it. You might get in an accident, whatever, it's going to happen. So like the fact that like you have an outward facing camera to record anything that happens out on a public highway, great.
Mm-hmm.
Turning it around and facing the driver, especially if you're an OTR long haul guy, you live in that truck. I mean, even if you're a local driver, you're in it 10, 12, 14 hours a day. That's like your workspace. Danielle, when we get off this Zoom meeting, are you going to have the camera looking at you all day or are you going to turn it off?
That was my dad's base argument. If we're
I,
going to do that to the drivers, we have to have our webcams on at all time and someone watching us. That's ridiculous. One, I told you I work all day long. I'm sitting here, but no one wants to watch me like fidget around or like rock back and forth in my chair staring at my computer. No one wants to watch my dad driving in his truck or especially hearing his conversations. He calls me, he calls his wife, his daughter, his dad. Like that's personal.
yep.
And I do understand the outward facing. And if I'm not mistaken, statistically, when a semi is in a wreck, the chance of it being the other car's fault is far greater than it being the truck's fault.
Yeah, yeah. Typically, it's like over 80% the fault of the four wheeler when
Yeah.
it's a car and a truck involved.
Yeah. I knew it was pretty high. So I get that. And being able to prove that the driver did not drive his murder machine into the car on purpose. I get that. And I don't say murder machine in a negative. term because I love trucks and drivers.
That's just a rhetorical flourish.
Yeah, exactly. So I get that. And being able to prove that it wasn't our fault, it was actually this car that cut over in front of us and slammed on the brakes. And I have 80,000 pounds of metal that I'm trying to stop on a dime. But the inward facing, there would have to be a serious, legitimate argument for me to ever change my mind on that one. I don't think there is a serious, legitimate argument that would ever make me change my mind. Because, like you said, the long haul drivers, the over the road that are on the road 4 days, that's their home.
Yeah, and I get it. Like I understand. Like I want to what's the term people use? I want to steel man the argument of the people who want these cameras in there. Okay. I will engage the steel man argument, which is that yeah, sometimes it is the driver's fault. If you're playing on your phone, picking your nose, whatever, and you're not paying attention, you're a threat to people. And I've seen videos. I've seen driver facing camera videos. There was a famous one in Canada here a few months ago where a guy rear-ended, stopped traffic, hit this minivan, killed the people inside it, and you could see he was down playing on his phone like this, like totally not paying
But
attention to
we
the
have
road.
that data. I could go back and get the data from that phone and tell you the exact moment that we know the exact moment that the wreck happened because we have the ELD. I can tell you when he slammed on his brakes. I could, via court, get authority to look at his phone data and tell you that he's on his phone at that exact same time. Why do I need a camera to tell me that he's on his phone?
Right. That's great. This is good stuff. Um, but like again, sometimes the steelman argument does not understand these nuances. But like my big bugaboo, and I'm sure you know this from seeing me on Twitter and LinkedIn for as long as you have, is that I the problem I have with the inward facing camera and any of the other technology. It doesn't even have to be the camera. It could be the front brake avoidance, the lane control, automatic transmissions. These technologies were developed after the trucking industry decided that it would rather not solve its retention problem and would rather sweep in all kinds of new people into the business, many of whom shouldn't be there,
Mm-hmm.
into trucking rather than change the problems in the trucking industry or pay guys more or treat them better and keep the good high quality drivers in that do not get in accidents, right? Like I'm not tooting my own horn here. 27 years I've never been in a collision. I've never
That's
run in
amazing.
I've never run into anybody. I've never wrecked a piece of equipment. Had a little woohoo up north once, had to get dragged out of the bush with a bulldozer, but that was actually somebody else's fault. But whatever, I didn't wreck the truck, I didn't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
And like, you know, why do I have to have a camera looking at me? I'm just like, no. Do I need front brake avoidance? No, I got two fucking eyes and I'm watching what's happening in front of me. Right? Like when you actually peel back the layers of the intent of this technology and why they put it in the trucks, all of it is because of like some perceived human fault.
It
That
is.
that human fault can be dealt with by putting better humans in the vehicles to begin with, right? Like, a problem with this is like nobody wants to be told that they're like not good enough, and it's kind of like people want to like dance around like, oh, anybody can do anything, and this isn't your fault, and it's always those other people. Oh, I'm not saying you're a bad driver. It's all those other idiots on the road. Guess what?
Mm-hmm.
All those other idiots are you and me. I
Mm-hmm.
will be the first to admit I make mistakes on the road. Oh shit, I forgot to turn my turn signal on, or
I
oh,
do that a lot.
I swerved. My wife gave me the wrong directions somewhere. I make
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. When you internalize the notion that you are, in fact, the idiot bad driver of everybody else's idea that no, it's those other drivers. No, you are that other driver. You become a better driver. Just acknowledge
Yes.
it. Just acknowledge that you're human and you have faults, and you will become better and you will think about it more, right? Um,
But we don't like to internalize and change our own behaviors. It's easier to blame others. We is not me.
Right, the royal we.
Hmm.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but that's being an adult now and being in the workforce, not company specific, not my current job specific, but the amount of people that work reactively versus proactively drives me insane. It's just what you said. Instead of dealing with the problem at the root, we're gonna create all of these processes, new technology things to deal with the actual issues that we're causing, like pumping people in and out of driving school, putting them on the road when they shouldn't be on the road. Instead of putting real people who care about driving in trucks, we're going to put bad people in trucks and then develop technologies to make them good.
I wonder what the like churn and retention rates are in trucking with people on the back end. Dispatch, freight brokers, support staff, admin, everybody at the office, forklift drivers on a dock, you know. What's
I
what
would say on the freight broker side, it's the would it be retention rates are high? No, retention rates are low. People are moving, leaving, coming in. I remember I was a freight broker for a year, and at my hiring class, there was like 20 something people, and they did a hiring class every 3 months.
interesting. Tell me more about your life as a freight broker.
So my school and college background is in social work. I have a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in social work. There's no money in that, which I found out very quickly. And I was doing social work. One of my best friends was working in Nashville for R&L carriers. And I saw how much she was making, which now that I look at it, I'm like, that was silly. But compared to what I was making at the time, it was a lot. And so I started looking at like the job boards, LinkedIn, not LinkedIn. It wasn't that time, Indeed. I started looking at Indeed for a similar job, and I saw one for BNSF Logistics, and I applied, and I went in and I told them, I know nothing about this side of the business. I've never done it. I know the driver side, but I don't know anything here. And I was hired and I learned a lot. Of course, I use it a lot now, my experience, but it was incredibly stressful. I don't think I've ever had a job that was as stressful as being a freight broker. I lasted 11 and a half months and I quit.
What was the cause of the stress? Like why was it stressful? What's going on?
So, as a freight broker, you're a middleman, for lack of better words, between the dispatch team of the carrier or the truck that you've hired or the actual driver. Sometimes I got to talk to them, which I still have some of their phone numbers. I don't talk to them, but I loved working with the actual truckers. And the other side of it is the customer. And the customers wanted updates all the time. And from where I come from, you pick up a load, you let someone know it's been picked up, you drive, you deliver the load, you let someone know it's been delivered. And so, this concept of getting updates every 15 minutes, hourly, every 2 hours, that was foreign to me. I hated it. I would have customers calling me at like 4 and 5 a.m. asking where their truck was. And I had a Ezra, my oldest now, he's 8. He was 1 to 2 at the time. It was too much. I loved my customers on a personal level. I loved the drivers that I worked with. Um, but the stress of keeping up with those updates of the drivers and relaying that back to my customers.
I got to talk to somebody who's been in brokering for a long time one of these days. I'm not trying to like dismiss your lack of experience, but like I had my uncle on the show. He started one of Canada's first freight brokers. He's been very successful, but he retired in 2009.
Hmm.
And he was old school. He was not the kind of guy to like call you constantly. And he probably would have fired anybody that worked for him that did harass drivers. He was a very pro driver freight broker because he started off as a driver and he
Yep.
understands how things work, and that there's a reciprocal respect, which is why he was so successful. But he's been out of the game for 15 years.
Hmm.
I don't know anyone. I guess I do. There's a few people I should call, but like I'm just curious about like when this expectation came about that brokers could call you constantly looking for updates, especially given that there's like GPS tracking and you could just call the company and be like, "Hey, where's this load?" and have dispatch tell you. Like, why are you calling the driver? Right? You've got the GPS in the truck. They know where it is. Why are you bugging the driver? I just want to know when that, for lack of a better word, the sort of harassment of the driver for this information
Hmm.
became standard operating procedure, because like I'm flummoxed, man. Like when did that start being a thing?
Yeah, it was a thing when I got into the brokerage. That was 2017. It was already a thing. So I don't, it
I'm just like
was
what's the value add? What so if you're
every 15 minutes, Gordon. Every 15 minutes, some of these customers wanted updates. You, if you're going 65 miles an hour for the next 4 hours, every 15 minutes, it's going to be the same update. He's 15 minutes ahead on I-40.
right. And the funny thing about that is like I want to the more interesting question, and I think I know the answer to this. I have a theory, I guess, is that the customer and people that are making these calls are folks in a traffic office for either the receiving or shipping side of a company, and they don't have very much to do and they're trying to justify their position. So they're telling their boss, "Oh yeah, I'm getting constant updates. I'm keeping track of all our loads. I'm keeping on top of that. I'm like making sure it's all tight." But in reality, you're just like making redundant fucking phone calls all day and not doing anything, and you're justifying your position. I could be wrong. That's the cynical take.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that's wrong. I won't apply it to everyone. I had one customer that was a grocery store. And so I knew every hour that my truck was late, it cost the grocery store like $7,500. That's pretty significant. Um, but that customer actually, I have to tell you this story because it's funny. He called me one morning. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. My son had been up all night. I was exhausted. And he calls me and he's yelling on the phone. And I like let him yell. And I said, when you calm down and stop yelling at me, you can call me back. And I hung up. I was so over it. This is like, I don't know, 6 months in and I was already over it. And about 10 minutes later, he called me back and he said, no one's ever hung up on me before. And I was like, I have a 1-year-old sleeping next to me. I'm sorry. And he told me that he gained incredible respect for me because I did that and that the update really wasn't needed right then and continued giving me freight. And I was very successful and did a really great job for them. But I think also when you're a shipper and you're using a freight broker, yes, it's needed, absolutely, but you do lose a bit of that control and not having direct access to the updates from the carrier. I don't know. Control freaks, I guess.
Yeah, it's very bizarre to me. I mean, I've done some like timing critical stuff. I worked in the oil field in northern Alberta for a few years, and I hauled fuel for I subcontracted to a fuel distribution company, and they would chase tanks. So basically this company would like lease. So let's say you're a pipeline construction contractor and you got to camp out in the bush 500 miles north of Edmonton somewhere. You're building a new pipeline, and you've got 100 guys at this camp, 20 pieces of equipment, dozers, wheel loaders, the little cranes for laying this. You got a bunch of guys working there, and you need like a constant flow of fuel. So they would rent a tank from us, or 2 tanks, or 5 tanks, or 8 tanks, or however much, like however big their operation was. Some of them were for like the oil sands mines directly. And we would go in, take them their dyed diesel for off road, regular diesel for their pickups and other equipment. Um, and then gasoline, whatever they needed. They had a card lock system, satellite tracking to like monitor the levels. If those guys run out of fuel, like they're done. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything comes to a halt. So like it's super critical. But even though that was super critical, they never bugged me. Like the fuel distribution guys I would work for, I would deliver a load. So I'd be like, all right, cool. I'm empty at Laricina Energy. Here's the dips for all the tanks so they could check it against the satellite. Um, I'll be in Edmonton at this time. What do you want me to do? Hour later, I would get an email back. Hey, Gord, thanks for the update. Take, 40,000 liters of dyed and 6,000 liters of clear to this other camp. This is the account number. Pick it up at
Mm-hmm.
Esso. And that would be it. They would never call me. I would go pick it up, stop at the yard, drop off the fuel receipts, fuel up, leave, drive 8-10 hours north, deliver later that day, and email again. It was like one email a day. Like, and this was with like a timing critical thing. Like, if any of those camps ran out of fuel, I would be in like supremely deep shit. The fuel distribution company I worked for would be in deep shit. The like heads would roll because we're talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars per day in production, gone if they run out of fuel. They did not bug me.
So you're a quality human and a quality truck driver who cares about his work. Do you think that maybe this is a symptom of the CDL mills where we're just
May,
pumping in
maybe.
drivers?
Sure, that's occurred to me again. I try and be diplomatic about this stuff, but then when you get to that, it becomes the snake eating its tail thing. Okay, cool. So we got all these people around here that we have to like treat like children, so we treat them like children, and then the people who don't need to be treated like children are take great offense to that and then leave, and then the
Mm-hmm.
cycle continues.
Mm-hmm.
My project, such as I have one, is to get the people in charge to stop putting the inputs into that system to keep it going. Like, okay, guys, let's be more human and stop wasting everybody's time and taxpayer money keeping this stupid thing going because
I support that.
it just doesn't work.
And the drivers, that is their job. I would say that the majority of them do actually care about the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I would hope so.
And I don't have anyone like chatting me or emailing me every 15 minutes, half hour, hour asking me what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, and again, I just have to wonder, you know, you hear about performance analytics um, on like labor employees at somewhere like Amazon. I'm sure there's some trades that do that with like, guys installing various things.
Hmm,
They want to make sure everybody's like the people paying for a project are getting their money's worth out of the people they hire.
of course.
But like, at some point, like, where's the point of diminishing returns with this, where you're just micromanaging people to the nth degree, and it stops being a useful thing to do.
Yeah. That is, we are talking about my job at Revenova and why I've stayed. I thrive in that more like environment where I have autonomy and can just do my work and no one bothers me as long as I'm doing my work and like providing. I can't imagine. I wouldn't stay at a company if I was micromanaged. I don't do well with that at all. I don't like being told what to do to begin with in any facet of life. So, especially my employer. There are things like I know what I have to be doing and goals and projects that I'm working on, but I don't have someone over my shoulder every moment or even every day saying, "Hey, what are you doing? How are you getting it done?" Don't worry, I'm just doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird trust stuff. One of the
Hmm.
things I noticed, did you come to F3 as well last year?
No, I didn't. I was supposed to. My youngest was actually sick. I told him we're not doing that this year.
He's not allowed to get sick.
Nope.
Oh wow, okay.
No. I
Um,
know.
Right. So you are going to F3.
I will be there.
All right.
I'm driving down Sunday. I'm actually doing a rapid fire demo on Tuesday, and our practice is on Monday. So I'm driving down Sunday.
So you're gonna be there basically for most of it, or just the front end?
Yeah, I think I don't really want to leave my kids at home for the entire week. So definitely Sunday evening, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Right. Yeah, I won't be there this year, but one of the things I noticed, and this is not to besmirch Freight Waves or anybody else. This is just an observation. A lot of the freight tech stuff was like companies building these systems for like checking MC numbers and establishing like who's actually hauling your freight. And I just thought to myself, like, there's like 25 people here, 25 companies selling a version of the same thing.
Yeah,
And
like
that,
freight fraud
yeah,
prevention.
yeah. And I get it. Like, freight fraud is a problem. Like, I am not diminishing the issue they're trying to solve. What makes me wonder, though, is like, again, the horses are already out of the barn. You're using a trucking market that, like, again, and this can be viewed as a positive thing, right? And Craig's written about this at FreightWaves that, like, as much as like the megas have like a certain percent of the market share, there's a lot of small operators out there, 1, 2, 5, 10 trucks, 20 trucks. There's tons of those guys around. That's fine. But with that, with the like super easy no barriers to entry, it seems to me like a lot of companies have no idea who's hauling their stuff. They're just like going to Dad or Coyote or CH Robinson or whoever, find me a truck. And it's just all like, what's your MC number? Like, obviously, relationships do develop over time, but
Yeah.
it just struck me like there's so many people doing this like trust service computer system that like it just seems foreign to me. Like where okay, so like that was never a thing when I started. And it's like if you actually are dealing with people and have a relationship with, like, you don't need any of this stuff. So like how much business is being done out there between a customer and a broker and a carrier where some of the people, like, you're flying blind, like you literally have no idea who's hauling your freight.
Yeah.
That's bonkers to me.
I will say the freight brokerages that I've known of that have the greatest success and have grown like exponentially, they prioritized their carrier network and actually knowing those carriers. Molo would be an example. Their first TMS was Revenova, and that's why I know so much about them. But they went from like 4 to 600 users, and I know that they focused on those carrier relationships and developing those relationships and nurturing those relationships. It would be hard. I mean, yeah, people are going to load boards. They have no idea. I remember my first interaction or first experience with a fraudulent carrier. He had gave me an MC number, and so I looked it up and it was fine. I ran it in whatever database we have, I don't remember. And I booked him on a load. And then I called back, and for some reason, I'd ask him for his MC again, and he gave me a different number. And I was like, what is on the outside of your truck? He had no idea, actually. The driver had no idea that the company that had booked him, which would be the dispatcher, was using, I don't even know how many MC numbers. And so I said that wrong. The dispatcher gave me one MC number that was approved with the company I was working for. When I talked to the driver and he gave me the MC number, which was the one on the outside of his truck, it was different than what the dispatch gave me. And so the load was fine. There wasn't any like claim. They didn't steal anything or run off with it. But that's everywhere. And it's wild. And I think that's also part of the tracking updates. The shippers and customers, they don't have control over that.
Right. I so there's there's um there's a whole segment of the trucking industry which are called private carriers.
Hmm.
And that's basically like um I am Steelcase office furniture in Michigan, for example. They've got some really hot looking rigs. Um, they haul their own stuff. They're not
Hmm.
on the open market. They don't haul anybody else's freight. We are Steelcase. Our trucks haul Steelcase stuff to Steelcase customers. That's all they do.
Yep.
Right. And a lot of companies aren't big enough to have that, and they don't want the hassle and headache of running their own trucks, which I understand. But at the same time, like if you're shipping things regularly and you want some confidence that your product is getting to your customers and getting to where it needs to be, I, yeah, if you have a relationship with a good broker who has relationships with good carriers and he's
Absolutely.
always sending you good guys, okay, great.
Absolutely.
Um, but this whole business of like chasing guys down and what's your MC number and like, what? Like, my uncle Chris, who ran his freight brokerage, he
Hmm.
had a bunch of different customers. Some of them were pretty big, Campbell's soup. Every can of Campbell's soup, every ingredient, every bit of packaging that moved in or out of Canada to any of the Campbell's soup plants distributed. Campbell's Soup Canada was my Uncle Chris. Whole enchilada, right? But he worked like he was very specific about what carriers he worked with,
Yeah.
right? Like, and he also understood, don't rip off the truckers. They're the guys that actually get stuff done
Yes.
because he started out as a trucker. My Uncle Chris
Yes.
drove truck for years. My grandpa drove, his two brothers drove, my dad, me. And I just, that relationship and understanding of things just seems to be one of these, I guess makes me crotchety and old, but it's a sort of standard that's been like, I don't know what the right word is, but like some people talk about the atomization of society, right? Everyone's like living in their little box and we could, everything, all communications are done through like digital mediums and we're very atomized. And I wonder if like the sort of general atomization society is reflected in this like this one specific industry where like I'll just call somebody up and they come get the load. It's like the Uberization of trucking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I would never rip off carries either when I was a broker. I got in trouble for it a few times. I don't care.
Right. There's so speaking of F3 and fraud and stuff, I see that our friend Craig Fuller has started a new newsletter and he was on some podcast here recently talking about, I think in one of them fraud, another one's energy. There's like a whole freight fraud thing now, which is some new subdivision service of FreightWaves. So I have to go check that out. I haven't looked at it yet, but
I
like
think I saw the like sign up for newsletter thing, but I haven't looked into
I
it.
have to sign up for that just because I'm curious. But like um I'm writing this, so hopefully this thing I'm writing will probably go public before the podcast. So this might be old news to people listening to this. I'm in the middle of writing a proposal, as it were, to this new thing that's coming with the Trump administration. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, the
Yeah.
DOGE,
Doge.
the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah.
So some folks I'm affiliated with, CDLDU, they had Vivek speak at this truckers town hall in Iowa. I have connections to Vivek through them. I've also been working kind of in the background with some people connected to JD Vance, um, you know, doing policy proposal stuff. So anyway, I'm writing this thing for Vivek and Elon for the Doge. Obviously there's the efficiency stuff, right? So I'm gonna like spill the beans on like the corporate welfare subsidization of driver retention, and then all the things the FMCSA does or does not do, should do, ought to do, are not doing.
Mm.
And one of those is the like freight fraud thing, right? Like it's in the government's interest. Like if the government represents a society, a people, a nation, and then the economy within it, and they have like a mandate to uh, protect and assist with that economy in whatever way. Um, I think it behooves them to like do something about this freight fraud thing, which just like, there was a couple of big stories a little while ago about like loads that were just being held for ransom. Like some,
Yeah.
the Chicago Volvo mafia or whoever would have a load, and then the customer would be like, "Where's my load?" And then like some guy with a Russian accent would be like, "You pay additional $5,000 this account, you get load." Like,
Hmm.
who's doing anything about that?
I don't know if anyone's doing anything, to be honest. I don't think it would be as rampant and as wild as it is if these people are being shut down.
Right, and this is what I'm saying about like, alerting these Doge guys. Like, if you're gonna like make the government efficient, the point of efficiency is so that you can like actually get the thing done you're supposed to be doing. The
Yes.
FMCSA, to my mind, is spending far too much time pushing paper around and worrying about driver compliance than they are about other parts of their mandate as the FMCSA to clean up various aspects of the industry. And one of them is the sort of freight fraud and the double and triple brokers and the brokers who are offshore. Then some of the dodgy operators bringing indentured servants here. I don't think they're doing enough of that. And I think like an efficiency thing would be to say, no, 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 no. You're going to focus on this stuff because we are seeing it actually happen. And like, hey, this guy over here at FreightWaves had to start like a whole new newsletter to alert his customers and his readers about it because you assholes aren't doing your job, right?
Yeah.
Like, like
And that's the newsletter. It's interesting and it's great, but there's no legal action. Like people aren't actually being stopped.
right. So here's the thing, right? Is like because there isn't any, the best thing you can do is just inform people.
Yeah.
And when Craig announced that, I was like, man, hats off to you, buddy. This is like mutual aid. This is like the market doing something
Yeah.
because, and same like the truck parking club guys, like Evan Shelley and Hunter and all them.
Hmm.
Um, some people get a little bit annoyed about the idea of having to pay for parking.
Then don't park in their parking lots.
Sure, I get it. I understand. We're so used to free parking. The truck stops are in a bind because like drivers don't want to spend money there anymore because they have less money because they're not getting paid enough.
Yeah.
Then the truck stops also have only themselves to blame because they upcharge so much crap, but they upcharge so much crap because they're not making any that much money on fuel. And there's all these problems, right? And all this stuff is
Yeah.
interconnected. And so then the truck parking club guys come along and say, okay, cool. Well, if we want to try and help with the parking thing and charge a nominal small fee, the landowners make some money, the truck drivers have somewhere to park. Yeah, it costs you $20 or whatever, but it solved the problem,
Yeah.
right? So that's what
Yeah.
Craig, I think that's what Craig's getting at with this like fraud alert thing. Like,
Yeah.
all right, if the FMCSA are not going to be efficient within their own organization and tackle these issues, I'll help.
Yeah. I think even though I did not win my rapid fire demo this past spring in Atlanta, I think Craig is brilliant. And I think when he has a brilliant idea or someone around him has a brilliant idea, he acts on it. And I think that's amazing.
All right. All right. So what was your rapid fire? You were trying to sell something? Was it for Revanova or was it
It
something
was
else?
so good. So every FreightWaves event, they have this 7 minute rapid fire demo. You have 7 minutes on stage to demo something about your product or in your product, and the lights go out at 7 minutes. So my coworker Liam Purcell and I were demoing part of our new fleet management or dispatch system. And we had like custom baseball jerseys made with Revanova on it. It was really cool. And Liam, I was demoing, but Liam's announcing was as if he was a sports broadcaster. And so he's like sports broadcasting me as a dispatcher, walking through like this whole route planning thing. It was really good, really energetic. We didn't win.
I the most memorable this was not a rapid fire thing, but the most memorable presentation at the one in Chattanooga last year, I thought
Read.
was hilarious was Reed the freight gong because he was trolling everybody in
Yeah,
that room. And it was
it
so
was
funny.
beautiful.
And he was getting away with it, you know? Like,
It was beautiful. I
yeah,
loved it.
he should have had a different career in comedy, maybe. But yeah, shout out Reed. Good day, Reed. How's things? Please advise. I should have worn my please advise hat. I have my another shout out. I got my autumn transport blaze orange deer hunting hat
Oh,
that
indie trucker.
yeah, Chris gave me.
Yeah.
He's out there. Oh, a little story about Chris. So he took this load to Alberta last week and he delivered it and then he went and got his trailer washed out this joint in Calgary. He got a little ways south of Calgary and then his fuel pump started acting up on him and basically quit. So he was like dead in the water.
Oh my gosh.
He's in this little town called Nanton and he texts me about it on Saturday morning. And I'm like, shit, man, I know a bunch of people in Alberta. Like I know truckers there. Like a bunch of the guys that like were part of the Coots protest are all from that neighborhood. Let me make some phone calls. So I call my friend Nikki and her husband Daryl, who have an oil field transportation company. And I'm like, hey, Daryl, have you got a fuel pump for an N14 kicking around? He's like, no, we don't have any Cummins stuff. I don't have anything that old, but like I know a guy in Nanton where your friend is. So we call that guy. There's this mechanic trying to help Chris. And then Nikki says to me, she's like, well, hey, man, my brother Nolan might be able to help him out. So like this guy Nolan, who I've never met, I only know him through his sister, who I've worked with helping these guys that got arrested in Canada. Nolan like roars out, grabs Chris. They go to some uh truck service place in Lethbridge or some guy that specializes in engines. And like eventually they get him a fuel pump and send him on his way. And in the meantime, like he had to stay a couple nights and like he's partying with people I know in Alberta, like drinking beer, hanging
Wow.
out. Yeah, just
Small world.
little connections, man.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I
shout
love
out
that.
Indie Trucker. I think yeah, I love it. I love being able to like help people just like by making a couple of phone calls.
Absolutely.
You know? So Danielle, is there anything else? I mean, I've got you here. Oh, geez, hour and quite a bit now. You've been very generous with your time. Is there anything else, or even something non-trucking related? Spicy, tell kids stories about your children, whatever. Anything else you got to say?
I don't think so. My 3-year-old wrecked his, so yeah, this is a good one. My 3-year-old is fearless, like absolutely does not care. He has a little Strider bike, which is the little balance bike with no pedals on it, and he's really, really good on it. And he goes way too fast for a 3-year-old. A couple of weeks ago, he was out riding in the street, which my Karen neighbor came over a couple of weeks ago and told me I need to keep a better watch on my children because they're riding their bikes on the sidewalk and I can't see them.
Gross.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a side street to the story. So Judah's outside riding his bike. We live in a neighborhood and people are careful. She said she almost ran over him. That's why I need to watch him. And I was like, okay, but you didn't. So anyway, he's riding his Strider in the street. I'm pulling the trash can around to the front. The next day was trash day. And my 8-year-old said, Mom, Judah wrecked. That's normal. I'm like, okay. He was like, no, Mom, he wrecked bad. And I was like, again, okay. He said, but he's bleeding. Again, he gets scratches. I'm not worried. And then he said, no, Mom, it's a lot of blood. And I look up and Judah's whole face is just pouring blood. I guess he got squirrely on his Strider and smashed his face into the pavement.
Oof. Oh,
Yeah,
poor kid.
yeah, it was pretty bad.
Oh.
His front 2 teeth were loose. We went to the dentist. Thankfully, they're not broken. They were fine. But yeah, it was
Oh, poor guy. Oh man.
it
My
was
uh
a that was a good one.
yeah,
Thank God it.
my youngest Georgia is on a strider, as you call them.
Yep.
Her older sister Vivi is like fully riding her bike, no training wheels on her little girl's BMX. Just
Hmm.
she's crushing it. Like Vivi just takes off now, which is awesome.
That
Because
is awesome.
yeah, one of the you know, like, again, having like trucking baked into the cake. When I was a kid, I would, when I was 13, 14 years old, I would get on my mountain bike and I would like get up on Saturday morning. You know, my parents were divorced and my dad was gone, whatever, and it was just me and my mom and my sister. But I didn't want to hang around the house.
Mm.
I lived like 20 something miles from Niagara Falls, 25 miles. I'd ride my bike to Niagara Falls when I was 13, or I'd go
Oh
the
my
other direction to
gosh.
Hamilton. And I carried inner tubes and a pump, I had a little backpack. I'd take money or lunch and I'd just ride my bike everywhere. I just couldn't sit still being at home.
Mm.
And so I'm really happy to see that like my kids are very enthusiastic bike riders.
Yeah, me
You
too.
know, I live on a little country road. I'm 8 miles outside of Ithaca. I mean, I live on this weird corner, and sometimes people come like whipping around it, and I feel like I need to sit out there with a potato gun and like bust their
Slow
windshields
them
to
down.
get them to slow down. But you know, my kids have been well trained to like stay away from the road, and then like when we do go for walks or I take them biking, like we just kind of it's a country
Yeah.
road. There's not that much traffic at all,
Mm.
and that's great. You shared a photo recently of incident involving yourself and some blood and gore.
We are on our 10th anniversary of this incident today. So
Right.
10 years ago, I was big into running and I had went on my longest run ever. It was 7.3 miles. I'd
Why
gotten
why
back to,
why am I not surprised?
I don't know that I
For
have
so
the
so
exact
so
number.
so for anybody who has never met Danielle or seen a photo of her, um, slender is a good way to describe Danielle's frame. Very
Yeah, I'm
very
pretty small.
very runner-ish.
Yeah, I am pretty small. Um, but 7.3 miles, got back to my house. I had my headphones in because I was listening to music, of course, and my headphones were really loud. I sat down in my driveway right behind my brother's truck, which was a Nissan Titan, and I was logging my time in my Strava app and getting ready to stretch. So I logged my time. I went down to stretch. I remember all this vividly, and sometimes it like haunts me, but it's okay. But I went down to stretch, like reach for my toes, and the next thing I know, I'm like in a ball upside down under the truck, screaming. And so I'm like kicking the underside of the truck, screaming. And my brother pauses or like stops and pulls back forward and gets out of the truck. And I, knowing my brother makes the story way funnier, but he looked down at me and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm running." And I'm laying there, like laid out on the concrete.
You were not running then.
No, I wasn't running. I said, "I'm running." And he just like stares at me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know. I can't get up. Maybe we should call 911." And then he looked at me like concerned, but also confused. And he said, "Are you sure?" And so I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't like sit up, but he had ran over my elbow with his wheel. So there's concrete, there's my elbow, and the wheel just ran over it. There were tire tracks all the way up my hand. So we don't really know, like, other than miraculously, my hand and arm weren't crushed. But this is the part I don't think about often, but I like to note there's not a lot of room between my elbow and my head. So for it to turn out just my crushed elbow, we're okay.
Right. Well, you know, there was a very famous incident here a few months ago where a quarter of an inch would have determined the fate of the free world.
Yeah, that was also a miraculous divine intervention.
Yeah, I spent a lot of my life as an atheist. I don't think I am one anymore. I've probably been moving away from that position very slowly for the last couple of years.
Hmm.
Um, not to say I've like landed anywhere. I still consider myself a free agent in that regard,
Hmm.
and I don't know enough. I haven't like looked into it enough, but yeah, the too much stuff has gone on here in the last few years for me to not consider uh, these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I grew up in the Bible Belt. So pretty much always been a Christian, but I didn't really get into it until I was an adult and started studying the Bible by myself. And it is fascinating. Like putting the actual history with the book and the teachings.
Yeah, I gotta get one of those like study Bibles that's got like all the context and other stuff,
You need one with the like historical context
right,
because
right,
that
right.
is what brought it like to light for me. And then I was like, oh my gosh.
Right. So like let's say I don't know, maybe this exists. It probably does, and I just haven't run into it. So you get a Bible, a study Bible that's got the stuff, but then also has like,
Yeah.
hey, this story here over these last 7 chapters, there's a whole book on this that you should go read over here by this guy. Go read that. Right.
Hmm.
And then you get a better
Yeah.
context understanding of what's going on. Um, a friend of mine suggested this book to me called the Mukaddimah, which
I haven't
is
heard of that.
um, this sort of like Arabic scholar named Ibn Khaldun. So sort of like a sort of study of like sociology and economics and philosophy and like what one today might consider like a condensed classical liberal education, but like
Okay.
from the perspective of a Muslim guy living in the like 12th century. And it's like everybody references it. It's this like big deal of a book, and I just got it. So
Sounds interesting.
yeah, we'll see how that goes. So
You'll have to let us know.
yeah, but if there's anybody out there amongst my listeners who have a good reference for a good study Bible, send it my way. I tried reading it when I was a kid. Like when I was like 14, I'm like,
Yeah.
man, numbers is really boring. And holy shit, everybody in Leviticus is trying to kill each other. And man, God's really mean. This sucks. I'm not reading it anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
And see, I was taught the methodology used to teach me the Bible was like the same as the cartoons I was watching, like characters. And so that's, I don't know, it was just like stories to me. And then when I got older and started reading more of the historical context and really understanding, now it's just fascinating to me. I
yeah,
love
well, I mean, everything is like context dependent. I got so bored in school and I hated it so much when I was like in grade 7, grade 8, grade 9. I would just bring books. I would just like
Yeah.
read stuff. And I was reading things that like I was probably way too young. And so there's this whole list of books I read when I was a kid that like I need to revisit them now that like 30 years have passed
Hmm.
and I'm much older and I have much more life context. And it's like, oh man, I need to go back and read all this stuff, but no time. And one of those things is the Bible. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah. Danielle, you've been very generous with your time.
Of course, I blocked off 2 hours for you.
You did.
Hey, I have a very serious question before we go.
Right. What's that?
At what point in your life did you start going by Gord and not Gordon?
Ooh, good question. Ah, was it 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 came in ebbs and flows. Um,
Okay.
so my dad and at least one of my uncles and one of my aunties would regularly call me Gordy. There's a very famous hockey
Like
player from Can.
Gordilocks.
There's a very famous hockey player from Canada named Gordie Howe,
Okay.
and so they called me Gordy, which I hated.
I
Um,
could see why.
uh, Not that I don't like Gordie Howe, but like it was just like, I'm not
It's like
Gordy.
the
I'm
on your name,
yeah,
Gordy.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So that didn't work. And then I had some like my mother always called me Gordon, my grandparents. Um, and then some of my aunts on my dad's side would just call me Gord. Especially my auntie Renee, whose husband, my uncle Gord, I was named after in part.
Hmm.
So some people called me Gord, some people called me Gordon. Um, Probably by the end of high school, it was just basically Gord. There was like no more Gordon. Even teachers didn't do that. Like when I formally introduce myself to people, I say, "Hi, my name's Gordon. Nice to meet you," and then they'll call me Gord after that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, Once in a while, my dad or my uncle Chris will call me Gordy just to piss me off because they know that it does that.
Yeah.
Gordilocks, as from my email, that came from a person I worked with at Burning Man. I used to work.
Okay.
I worked at Burning Man, this crazy festival in Nevada.
Yeah.
I
I know what
like
you're talking about.
I
It's
hauled their
interesting.
I hauled their ice trailers. I did all the shunting. These other two guys would go back and forth to Reno, bringing the trailers with ice, and me and some other people did the shunting on Playa. And there's a lady there whose Playa name was Scandilocks, and her she like I at the time I had dreadlocks. I used to have like a full dreadhawk, like straight top and back of my head, and like all the way down to my butt.
I don't believe it.
I have photos. I'll send them to you.
Yeah, I
And
want to see.
so anyway, she started calling me Gordilocks, like Gordy and my dreadlock hair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's where that came from. And then I just sort of, when I finally moved over to Proton Mail, when Proton Mail showed up, I used to have like a Yahoo address, which I still have, but I only use for junk.
Yeah,
And then so I use that as my email handle. And some people call me that still, and that's fine. But yeah, for the most part, it's Gord, and probably it's been that way consistently since high school.
interesting. I just wanted to know.
Do people call you Danny?
The only person that's ever called me Danny is the guy that I'm dating now, and I
All right.
allow it.
All right. Well, you must be a pretty good guy.
He is.
You lucky son of a bitch, let me tell you that.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better than me.
Oh, no, no.
I
All
have to
right.
remind him. I'm just kidding.
All
I'm just kidding.
right, Danielle. Hey, thank you for your time. Thanks for telling us about your family history and trucking, and way of the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Gord.